They predicted zero survival for humans until they defied the odds. Introduction. When humanity first ventured beyond the Sol system, they were met with wonder and hostility in equal measure. The universe, vast and ancient, teemed with civilizations far older and more advanced than Earth could comprehend. Yet, for all their technology and wisdom, the galactic powers dismissed humanity as insignificant, a species too fragile and primitive to survive the cosmic crucible. But humanity was never one to abide by predictions. The last colony. The screen flickered in the dimly lit command center aboard the Erebus, the last operational ship in what had once been a thriving Terran expedition fleet. Commander Rhea Morgan stood with her arms crossed, her sharp eyes fixed on the holographic display that loomed over the room. The map was a grim portrait, their colony world, Icarus IV, surrounded by a blockade of Velker warships, each bristling with weapons powerful enough to vaporize a small moon. Behind her, the quiet hum of the ship's systems was punctuated by the whispers of her bridge crew. Fear hung heavy in the air. The Velker were infamous for their ruthlessness. They believed in the sanctity of power, and to them, humanity was an affront, a weak, young species that dared to claim a slice of the galactic frontier. Velker fleet is holding position, Commander. Ensign Cal Birch reported, his voice tight, no signs of immediate aggression. Yet, Morgan turned, her jaw set like steel. They're waiting, she said grimly, waiting for us to starve. The colony on Icarus IV had been humanity's beacon of hope, a lush, resource-rich world on the edge of habitable space. But when the Velker laid siege to the planet, they severed all supply lines. The colony's defenses were meager, and the Velker knew it. Earth's distant government, stretched thin by its own struggles, had declared Icarus IV a strategic loss. The colonists, however, refused to surrender. "We can't let them sit out there unchallenged," growled Lieutenant Arjun Patel, the ship's chief tactical officer. "They'll bleed us dry, 1 week at a time." Morgan raised a hand, silencing him. "And what would you suggest, Arjun? Take the Erebus and charge headlong into their fleet?" Her voice was calm, but her words struck like a whip. He hesitated. "No, but we can't just. We fight smarter," Morgan interrupted, her tone softening. "The Velker don't see us as a threat. That's our greatest advantage. If we're going to survive this, we need to use everything we've got, every ounce of ingenuity and grit. We're humans, we've done the impossible before." Patel nodded, though his expression remained grim. Meanwhile, on Icarus IV, in the sprawling underground bunker that served as the colony's command hub, Governor Elias Ryn strode into the control room, his features etched with exhaustion. Dozens of colonists huddled around improvised consoles, their faces illuminated by flickering displays. Power rationing had reduced their systems to bare essentials. "Status?" Ryn asked, addressing Dr. Kara Imani, the colony's lead scientist. "Critical," she replied bluntly. "The water purifiers are failing. If we don't get parts soon, we'll have a crisis on our hands. And the food reserves." She trailed off, shaking her head. Wren pinched the bridge of his nose, his shoulders sagging. "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe less." The room fell silent. Outside, in the distant skies, the ominous glow of Velker ships hovered like vultures waiting for their prey to fall. But Kara's eyes held a spark of defiance. "There's something we can try," she said, her voice low. Wren looked up, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "What is it?" "We've been studying Velker tech from the wreckage of that scout ship we took down last month," Kara explained. "If we can adapt their molecular shielding system, we might be able to cloak our supply transports long enough to run the blockade." "It's a long shot, but..." Wren straightened. "Do it. Whatever you need, take it. This colony isn't dying on my watch." Back on the Erebus, Morgan leaned over the strategy table in her private quarters, her hands spread over the glowing hologram of the Velker fleet. She knew their odds. The Velker blockade was impenetrable. Her ship was outdated, its crew a patchwork of survivors from other battles. But Morgan also knew something the Velker didn't: humanity had never been about the odds. Her console chirped. It was Patel. "Commander, The colony just sent us a data burst, he said. They've got a plan, and it's crazy. Morgan smiled faintly. Perfect, patch it through. As Patel relayed the details, Morgan's mind raced. Cloaking tech? Supply runs through a hostile blockade? The Velker would never expect it. But if it failed? She pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. Prep the crew, Morgan said, her voice steady. This is humanity's fight, and we're not going down without a damned good story to tell. The plan in motion. The Erebus's engine room buzzed with activity as engineers worked feverishly, adapting Kara Imani schematics for the Velker cloaking technology. The stolen tech was primitive by alien standards, little more than fragments from a shattered Velker scout ship, but it offered a glimmer of hope. The modifications would push the Erebus to its limits, but Commander Morgan had made one thing clear: limits no longer mattered. Morgan stood on the bridge, her fingers gripping the railing as she addressed the crew. The tension in the room was palpable, yet her voice carried a quiet resolve that steadied even the most anxious among them. We've been underestimated our whole lives, she began, her gaze sweeping over her officers and technicians. By the Velker, by the Council, by anyone who's ever looked at Earth and called us weak. Today, we prove them wrong. We're not just fighting for Icarus IV, we're fighting for humanity's right to exist in this galaxy. She paused, letting her words sink in. This mission is dangerous, and it may cost us everything, but if we succeed, we'll show the Velker and the galaxy what humans are capable of. A ripple of determination passed through the crew. The cloaking test. Below decks, Chief Engineer Mei Lin wiped sweat from her brow as she monitored the integration of the cloaking device into the Erebus's systems. Sparks flew as technicians wielded fusion torches, welding alien components into the human ship's outdated framework. This thing wasn't built for stealth, Lin muttered to her assistant, a wiry young tech named Caleb. We're duct taping an alien Ferrari to a Terran dump truck and hoping it runs. Caleb chuckled nervously. Optimistic as always, Chief. Lin rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smirk. She tapped her comlink. Bridge, this is engineering. We're ready to test the cloak. Understood, Morgan replied. Initiate on my mark. Lin nodded to her team. Power it up. The lights dimmed as the ship's reactor diverted energy to the experimental cloaking array. A deep hum reverberated through the hull, and for a moment, Lin held her breath. The monitors flickered, then stabilized, displaying the external view of the ship. Slowly, the Erebus began to shimmer, its edges blurring until it vanished entirely from view. We've got visual distortion, Lin reported, her voice tinged with excitement. The cloak is holding. On the bridge, cheers erupted, but Morgan raised a hand, silencing them. Good work, Chief, but keep monitoring. If this cloak fails mid-run, we're sitting ducks. The first run, the Velker blockade glimmered like a curtain of malevolence in the night sky. Their ships floated in perfect formation, sensors sweeping the void for any sign of movement. The Erebus, now cloaked, drifted silently through the darkness. Morgan stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Patel monitored the Velker's sensor patterns, searching for any anomalies that might betray their cloaked presence. Steady, Morgan whispered as the ship inched closer to the blockade. Suddenly, one of the Velker ships shifted position, its sensor array sweeping perilously close. Patel stiffened. They're scanning, Commander, he said, his voice tight. Their sensors are brushing against our distortion field. Morgan's heart raced. She turned to Lin. Patched in from engineering. Can we stabilize the cloak? Lin's voice crackled over the comm. Pushing more power now. Hold tight. The Erebus shuddered as the cloak absorbed the additional energy, smoothing the distortion just as the Velker's skin passed over them. The alien ships resumed their formation, unaware of the Terran vessel slipping through their grasp. A sigh of relief swept through the bridge. Don't celebrate yet, Morgan warned. This was the easy part. At the colony, on Icarus IV, the colonists worked tirelessly to prepare for the incoming supply drop. Governor Wren coordinated teams of workers, Ensuring the hidden landing site was secure, Kara Imani stood by the makeshift comm array, monitoring the Erebus's approach. "This will work," she murmured to herself, more a prayer than a statement. A junior technician glanced at her. "And if it doesn't?" Kara didn't hesitate. "Then we'll find another way, we always do." The supply drop. The Erebus descended into Icarus IV's atmosphere under the cover of night. The cloak flickered as the ship strained against gravity, but Lynn's team kept it stable. The ship landed in a hidden valley, where colonists swarmed to unload the desperately needed supplies. Morgan stepped off the ramp, greeted by Ren and Kara. She clasped Ren's hand firmly. "You didn't give up," she said, a note of admiration in her voice. "Neither did you," Ren replied. Kara wasted no time. "We need to talk. There's a bigger opportunity here." Morgan frowned. "What kind of opportunity?" Kara gestured to a small crate being unloaded. "That's not just water purifiers and rations. We've been working on something experimental, a weapon." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "A weapon? Against the Velker?" Kara nodded. "It's not ready yet, but if we can hold out long enough, it might tip the scales." Morgan glanced back at the Erebus. "Then let's make sure you have the time you need." The Velker respond. The Velker commander aboard the battleship Varnock reviewed the latest sensor reports with growing frustration. There was a distortion, his lieutenant reported, pointing to the data logs. "It lasted only a moment, but it suggests a cloaked vessel." The commander's mandibles clicked in irritation. "The humans are bolder than I thought. Strengthen the patrols and activate the orbital traps. If they think they can outsmart us, they will learn the price of defiance." The counterstrike. The Erebus soared into the blackness of space, leaving Icarus IV behind. Supplies had been delivered, and the colony's immediate survival was secured. But the crew knew their victory was temporary. The Velker would respond, and next time, they wouldn't hesitate to annihilate the humans. Morgan paced the bridge, her mind racing. Kara's mention of an experimental weapon replayed in her head. A weapon against the Velker? Could humanity's fledgling technology truly challenge a race that had ruled this region of space for centuries? "Commander," Patel called from his station, "we've intercepted a Velker transmission. Their fleet is reorganizing. Looks like they're deploying orbital traps around Icarus IV." Morgan frowned. Orbital traps were automated mines designed to detect and destroy cloaked vessels. The Velker weren't taking any chances. "Options?" Morgan asked. Patel hesitated. "If those traps go live, the colony will be completely isolated. We won't be able to get supplies in or evac anyone out." Morgan's jaw tightened. "Then we destroy the traps before they're activated." Patel turned to her, eyebrows raised. "You want to attack the Velker fleet directly?" "No," she replied. "I want to outsmart them. Again." Planning the trap. In the Erebus's war room, Morgan and her senior officers gathered around a holographic display of the Velker fleet. Red markers indicated the orbital traps, each one positioned to form an impenetrable net around Icarus IV. Kara's voice came over the comm, patched in from the colony. "Commander, I know it's a risk, but we might be able to help you from here." Morgan glanced at the display. "I'm listening." "We've been studying Velker energy signatures," Kara explained. "If we can broadcast a false signal from the surface, we might be able to lure their ships away from the traps temporarily." Patel rubbed his chin. "Draw them off, then hit the traps while their guard is down. It's risky, but it could work." Morgan nodded. "Do it, but make sure the colony stays hidden. If the Velker realize the signals coming from Icarus IV, they'll bombard the planet." The feint. On the surface of Icarus IV, Kara and her team worked tirelessly to construct the signal emitter. It was a makeshift device, cobbled together from scavenged Velker tech and Terran ingenuity. "Energy levels are stable," Kara reported, her voice tight with concentration. "Starting broadcast, now." High above the planet, the Velker fleet stirred. The false signal appeared on their sensors like a beacon, a massive surge of energy that mimicked a human fleet assembling for battle. On the Varnock, The Velker commander's eyes narrowed. Humans? Attacking us? Arrogant fools. Move the fleet to intercept. The Velker ships shifted formation, leaving the orbital traps momentarily exposed. Striking back, the Erebus emerged from the shadow of a nearby moon, its cloaking field shimmering as it powered down. Lynn and her engineering team had reconfigured the ship's weapon systems, adapting Velker plasma emitters salvaged from the scout wreck. Targets locked, Patel reported. Orbital traps are vulnerable. Morgan gave the order. Fire. The Erebus unleashed a volley of plasma blasts, each one striking with pinpoint accuracy. One by one, the orbital traps detonated in bursts of light. On the bridge of the Varnock, alarms blared. Commander, the Velker lieutenant shouted, the humans are attacking our traps. The Velker commander roared in frustration. Recall the fleet, destroy that ship. The chase. As the Velker fleet turned back toward Icarus IV, the Erebus engaged its engines at full burn, racing to evade pursuit. The Velker ships were faster and better armed, but Morgan had anticipated this. Set course for the asteroid field, she ordered. Patel hesitated. The field's dense. Commander, if we lose the cloak, we'll be sitting ducks. Morgan's lips twitched in a faint smile. Trust me. The Erebus plunged into the asteroid field, weaving through the tumbling rocks with precision. Behind them, the Velker fleet hesitated. The asteroids were a hazard even for their advanced ships. Status on the cloak? Morgan asked. Lynn's voice came over the comm. Holding steady, for now. Just don't ask me to do anything crazy. Morgan smirked. Define crazy. The weapon's secret. Back on Icarus IV, Kara's team worked around the clock to prepare the experimental weapon. It was a prototype unlike anything humanity had built before, a device designed to disrupt Velker energy shields by emitting a focused electromagnetic pulse. Ren stood over Kara's shoulder as she calibrated the device. Will it work? He asked. It has to, Kara replied. The Erebus is buying us time, but if we can't take down their shields, nothing we throw at them will matter. Ren placed a hand on her shoulder. You'll make it work. You always do. Kara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. The final stand. The Erebus emerged from the asteroid field, its hull battered but intact. The Velker fleet, now regrouped, loomed ahead, cutting off their escape. We're out of tricks, Patel muttered. Morgan's expression hardened. Not yet. She opened a secure channel to the colony. Kara, is the weapon ready? Almost. Kara replied. We just need a few more minutes. You've got to, Morgan said. She turned to her crew. Hold the line, whatever it takes. As the Velker ships closed in, the Erebus launched every missile and plasma charge it had, forcing the enemy to focus their fire. Explosions lit up the void as the Velker ships retaliated, hammering the Terran vessel. We can't take much more of this, Lynn shouted over the comm. Morgan's voice was calm. We're not here to survive, Chief, we're here to buy time. Unleashing humanity's fury. On the surface, Kara activated the weapon. A pulse of blinding blue light shot into the sky, enveloping the Velker fleet. Their shields flickered, then collapsed entirely. Morgan seized the moment. Target their engines. Fire everything we have left. The Erebus's remaining weapons struck home, crippling several Velker ships. The once dominant fleet reeled in disarray. On the Varnock, the Velker commander stared at his failing systems in disbelief. Impossible. Morgan's voice crackled over an open comm channel. Not impossible. Human. Humanity's last push. The Erebus floated amid the wreckage of Velker ships, its systems barely holding together. Smoke curled from ruptured panels, and the lights flickered as power fluctuated. Despite the damage, the bridge was alive with determination. We've crippled 3 ships, Patel reported, but the rest of the Velker fleet is regrouping. They'll be on us in minutes. Morgan's gaze swept over her battered crew. Then we don't give them minutes. Patch me through to Icarus IV. The comm line crackled to life. Kara, the weapon worked, Morgan said, but we need to take this fight to the finish. How fast can you recharge it? Kara's voice came back, tense but steady. The emitter's fried. We can't fire another pulse without blowing ourselves up. Morgan clenched her fists. Then we'll have to do this the hard way. We've got one shot to end this. Send me everything you've got on Velker Fleet formation. We're making a direct assault. The desperate plan. Morgan called her officers into a hurried briefing. The holographic display showed the Velker Fleet tightening its formation, their flagship Varnock at the center. The Varnock is their command ship, Morgan said. If we take it out, the fleet will collapse. Patel frowned. With what weapons? We're nearly out of ammo. Morgan smiled grimly. We're not out of ideas. Chief Lin, how's our reactor holding up? Lin hesitated. Barely. If we push it any harder, we'll go critical. That's the point, Morgan replied. We're turning the Erebus into a weapon. The room fell silent. You're suggesting we ram their flagship? Patel asked, disbelief in his voice. Morgan nodded. If we detonate our reactor at point-blank range, it'll destroy the Varnock. Karas EMP weakened their shields. Our explosion will finish the job. The crew's choice. Back on the bridge, Morgan addressed the crew. I won't sugarcoat this. What I'm asking isn't just dangerous, it's a one-way trip. Anyone who wants to leave now, I'll understand. No one moved. Lin's voice cut through the silence. We didn't come this far to quit now, Commander. Patel grinned. If we're going out, let's make it count. Morgan felt a surge of pride. Then let's make history. The final battle. The Erebus surged toward the Velker fleet, its damaged engines roaring as Lin coaxed every ounce of power from the reactor. Velker ships opened fire, plasma bolts streaking through the void. The Erebus weaved and dodged, its shields buckling under the relentless assault. Focus all power on forward shields, Morgan ordered. We just need to get close. The Varnock loomed ahead, its weapons blazing. The Velker commander sneered as he watched the Terran ship charge. Foolish humans, he muttered. They rushed to their doom. The colony's gamble. On Icarus 4, Kara and her team scrambled to repair the EMP weapon. They knew the Erebus couldn't succeed without their help. The emitter circuits are fried, Kara said. We'll have to bypass the safeties and overload the core. Ren looked at her sharply. That'll kill you. Kara met his gaze. And if we don't, everyone dies. Without waiting for permission, she began the override sequence. The collision course. The Erebus closed in on the Varnock, its hull blowing red-hot from incoming fire. Inside, the crew braced for impact. Distance to target? Morgan asked. 5 kilometers, Patel replied. We're almost there. Suddenly, a surge of energy rippled through space. The EMP fired from Icarus 4 struck the Velker fleet, disabling their weapons and shields. Morgan's eyes widened. They did it. Now it's our turn, she said, her voice steady. A hero's sacrifice. The Erebus slammed into the Varnock, its reactor detonating in a brilliant explosion. The blast tore through the Velker flagship, shattering its hull and sending shockwaves through the fleet. On Icarus 4, the colonists watched in stunned silence as the Velker ships began to scatter. Without their commander, the fleet faltered, retreating into the void. Aftermath. Weeks later, Icarus 4 was still rebuilding. The colony had survived, but at a cost. Morgan and her crew were gone, their sacrifice etched into the colony's history. Kara stood at the edge of a memorial overlooking the valley where the Erebus had once landed. Beside her, Governor Wren placed a hand on her shoulder. They bought us a future, Wren said softly. Kara nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars, and we'll make it worth it. Epilogue, Humanity's Legacy. News of the humans' victory spread across the galaxy, shocking even the most powerful civilizations. For the first time, the Velker's dominance had been challenged, and by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. On distant worlds, whispers grew louder. Who were these humans, and what else were they capable of? Back on Earth, a single transmission from Icarus 4 reached the Terran High Command. It was a simple message, but it carried the weight of a new era. We are still here.